Hey there, friend. I'm honestly glad you decided to watch this. If you end up subscribing to my channel, that'll make my day even brighter. Anyway, let's get into it. You know what, Matthew? If I have to endure one more of your heart-spilling speeches, I might just doze off right here. That was the moment, sharp and unmistakable, when something inside me finally snapped. She stood right in the center of our dim, cramped living room. Her arms were folded across her chest, manicured nails clicking against her skin in a slow, impatient beat, like a metronome counting down to something inevitable. Hannah, my wife for 7 years, my closest ally since our university days, stared at me like I was some tedious form she couldn't wait to toss in the trash. I stayed sunk into the couch cushions, the words I'd been ready to say dissolving under the weight of her disinterest. "Sorry if I'm not exactly a fireworks show tonight," I said, my voice wound tight. "I thought it still mattered to talk about how I feel." She rolled her eyes, plucked her small clutch from the side table and said, "It does matter. Sometimes. But this?" She waved her hand like she could shoo away the air itself. "This heavy, dreary vibe, it's exhausting." I ground my teeth, fighting the urge to shout, to slam my hand against the wall, to remind her that I was breaking myself with 60-hour work weeks to keep us above water, that I never skipped a single one of her schmoozy networking dinners, despite knowing I was only there for appearances, that I loved her, even now. But I knew none of it would land tonight. She swept past me, misting perfume in the air like she was already halfway into some other life. "It's just dinner with friends, Matthew. Don't wait up." No glance back, just the muted click of the front door sealing shut. The shadows in the room seemed to spread. Outside, bare branches scratched against the window in uneven bursts. I let the silence sink in, chewing on the stubborn little hope that this was just another rut, another bad patch. Then my phone buzzed, unknown number. 4 words appeared, "She's lying to you." The impact was instant, like taking a punch I hadn't braced for. My chest tightened. I hovered over the message, torn between deleting it and calling the police. Before I could decide, another text popped up. "If you want the truth, meet me. Tomorrow, 9 a.m., Cafe Driftwood. Don't tell her." I stared, pulse drumming fast and heavy. This wasn't a prank, someone knew something. The clock read 11:42 p.m. Hannah still wasn't home. That used to irritate me. Now it unsettled me, not because I thought she was in danger, but because I was starting to believe she wasn't. I switched off the lamp, the only light now the cold blue glow of my phone. In its reflection, I saw a face worn down, lines etched deeper, shoulders sagging under the weight of something already broken. I closed the messages and booked a ride to the cafe. If someone was ready to spill the truth, I wasn't going to miss my chance. I used to think Hannah was my safe place. Now I wasn't even sure the ground under us was real, and I could feel it shifting. Morning came. I sat tucked in the corner of Cafe Driftwood, both hands wrapped around a mug that had gone cold long before. Of course I'd arrived early. The place had a hushed warmth. Old wooden floors creaked under the measured steps of baristas, soft guitar notes floated from the speakers, and the scent of cinnamon mingled with oat milk in the air. Cozy, harmless. The last kind of place you'd expect to watch your life tilt sideways. Then she appeared, Zoe. Her eyes scanned the room the way someone might look for the nearest exit before even considering where to sit. When she spotted me, there was a pause. Just long enough for me to think she might turn around and vanish. Instead, she crossed straight to my table and slid into the chair opposite me. She looked worn thin, as though sleep had kept its distance for days. Her pale green eyes, shadowed with a touch of gray, were sharp but tired. Hair pulled back in that careful, effortless way that still takes work. No makeup, yet there was something quietly striking about her. She didn't radiate revenge. She radiated a kind of hurt that had hardened into resolve. "You're Matthew?" she asked quietly. I nodded. "You're the one who texted me?" A small nod confirmed it. She took a sip from the latte the server had just placed before her, as if revealing an affair over morning coffee was simply another task on her list. Setting the cup down, she said plainly, "My husband's name is Owen. He's the man your wife's been seeing." I didn't reply right away. My eyes fixed on the scratches along the table's surface. Discussing something this raw with a stranger in a public cafe felt almost unreal. "I found their messages 2 weeks ago," she went on. "It's ridiculous. I only saw them because he left his laptop open. I hadn't even been suspicious before that." "Are you certain it's Hannah?" I asked at last. Zoe's answer was a firm nod. "Her name's all through the thread. So are her pictures, hotel bookings. And last night, I watched her walk into the same restaurant Owen claimed he'd be at, alone." A sick twist worked its way through my stomach. "She told me she was meeting old friends." Zoe's mouth curved into a bitter half-smile. "Owen said it was a business dinner. Amazing, isn't it? How much they get out. Just never together." We let a silence settle, broken only by the hiss of steaming milk and the clink of cups. Then she leaned in, voice low. "I want to follow them," she said. "Quietly, keep a record, not to catch them. I already have proof. I just want the whole picture, and I think you do too." I hesitated. "What exactly are you hoping to find?" "Something that can't be unseen. Something that makes walking away easier." And there it was, the truth beneath all of this. Not about confrontation, not about bargaining, about erasing the last trace of doubt. I nodded slowly. "All right, I'm in." A flicker of relief crossed her face. "Good. I already have a plan." It was a strange kind of alliance, the wife of the man my wife was likely sleeping with. But there was a dark dignity in choosing to stop sitting in the shadows. As we stepped into the cool morning air, Zoe glanced my way. "We'll alternate days, less chance of getting caught. And no one breathes a word. Not yet." Certainly not them, absolutely not them. We exchanged numbers, no handshakes, no dramatic oaths about payback. Just a quiet, mutual understanding over lukewarm coffee. Afterward, I walked home, not exactly calm, but with the haze in my mind just thin enough to see through. Some people go chasing after closure. I had finally reached the place where I was ready to turn the knob and walk through the door. It started without theatrics. No frantic pursuits, no whispered secrets in dim hallways. Just two people taking turns sitting in a borrowed quiet, piecing together the scattered shards of their partners' double lives. The next night, Zoe and I met again. She'd parked on the far curb across from a sleek Arts District restaurant, the type with valet parking out front and servers dressed in crisp black aprons. Hannah had once taken me there for an anniversary. I remember flipping through the wine list and realizing a single bottle cost more than 4 weeks of groceries. Zoe was already in the passenger seat when I arrived. She rolled the window down just enough to speak. "They're inside," she said softly. "By the window." She laughed when he touched her hand. It sounded harmless. It wasn't. It landed like a blow to the ribs. I looked across the street. There they were, Hannah, my Hannah, leaning toward Owen, her smile bright in a way I hadn't seen in months. Owen sat there with the kind of smooth, casual charm that assumes no one's looking. "I took pictures," Zoe said, handing me her phone. The images were a bit blurry, but the meaning was crystal clear. Hannah's hand resting on his knee, his fingers making slow, deliberate circles on her wine glass as though rehearsed for a scene in a romance film. I wanted to imagine some innocent explanation, but the rhythm between them, the familiarity, was too perfectly in sync to ignore. A few days later, we followed them again. Separate cars, different streets. Zoe spotted them sharing a cab, leaning in too close, voices low. I stayed outside the downtown Marriott while she caught them on camera slipping in through a side door, dressed far too casually for anything corporate. We never used the word affair. We didn't need to. Instead, we found each other in half-lit parking lots, holding cheap coffee, trading updates like detectives who'd stopped being surprised weeks ago. "Ever feel like you're living the wrong life?" I asked one night, our breath making small clouds in the cold. "All the time," Zoe said. like I woke up in the wrong version of the story. Patterns emerged. Same days every week. Tuesday evenings, Thursday lunches. Never 2 days in a row, like instinct told them to keep their tracks scattered. Twice they'd booked the same restaurant. Different names, identical table, identical time. Zoe printed the confirmations from her husband's synced email. We documented everything. Dates, times, photos, notes. I built a spreadsheet. She color-coded the calendar. The part that unsettled me most wasn't their betrayal. It was how easy it was for someone you love to hide behind polite excuses and a practiced smile. We never discussed what would happen with the proof. Not yet. It wasn't revenge we were chasing. Not now. It was about staring the truth straight in the eye. In between stakeouts, the conversation shifted. She told me about her publishing job, mostly nonfiction. I told her about IT work, endless troubleshooting, quiet offices. We swapped stories, compared lies we'd been fed. Then her questions changed. She asked about Hannah before all this, what I'd loved about her. I told her honestly. Hannah used to laugh at my terrible impressions, fall asleep with her head in my lap during old movies, insist on dancing with me in the kitchen when it rained. She sounds like she used to be real, Zoe said with a faint smile. She was, I replied. Or maybe I just wasn't seeing her clearly. Zoe didn't argue. When she laughed, it wasn't cautious. It was bright, sharp, unguarded. I realized I hadn't heard that kind of sound in a long time. Long enough that I almost didn't recognize it. But this wasn't romance. Not yet. This was still a kind of war, slow, precise. The only change was that the battlefield didn't feel so empty anymore. One evening, it was supposed to be routine. Same plan, same steps. Zoe texted earlier. She told him she's working late again. Want to see what that really means? We met in a half-empty parking garage across from what I thought was Hannah's office, or what she claimed was her office. 6 months earlier, she'd told me she'd left her corporate job for development work at an arts nonprofit. I hadn't questioned it. She brought home glossy brochures, donation slips, even a tote bag with the group's logo. The pay cut had been obvious, but she said the work mattered more. I believed her, or I told myself I did. From across the street, we watched the building as the clock neared 6. People trickled out, men in jackets, women with lanyards, some scrolling their phones. Zoe leaned forward. There he is, she whispered. Owen, tan coat, easy grin, stood talking to a brunette, but no Hannah. Zoe frowned. That's strange. What is? She told him she was staying late for a donor event. If she's inside, why's he leaving? I had no answer. Minutes passed. More people left. The lobby lights dimmed. No Hannah. Zoe pulled a folded document from her bag. I called them yesterday, she admitted. Pretended I was asking about internships. Got them to send me the org chart. She flipped to a page and pointed. Here's the whole development team. No Hannah Lorne, not even a misspelled variant. You're certain? I checked 3 times, even cross-referenced with their LinkedIn profiles. She's not there. The steering wheel felt cold under my hands. So where's she been going every day? Zoe shook her head slowly. I think we've been watching the wrong place. The silence that followed felt heavier than any words. She's been faking a job, I said at last, for 6 months. We sat there mapping the boundaries of the lie. A made-up work life. Daily departures. The fake phone calls I'd overheard from the kitchen. Supposed business dinners. Meetings. All of it staged. She probably sees Owen during the day, Zoe said quietly. Uses the fake job as cover. Makes it all look legitimate. The theory didn't just seem plausible, it fit too precisely, like a puzzle piece clicking into place. And with that realization, her deceit swelled in my mind, no longer confined to secret afternoons in dim hotel rooms. It was bigger, an elaborate charade, a fabricated life staged in parallel to mine, with me written entirely out of the story. My stomach churned. You all right? Zoe's voice was low, almost careful. I gave a small nod, though it was far from the truth. There's a particular kind of pain that comes when you understand your partner's betrayal isn't merely physical. They've been living in a version of reality where you don't exist. Zoe's hand brushed against mine, not seductive, not hesitant, just steady, human contact. I know it's a lot, she murmured. It changes everything. No, I said quietly. It proves everything. That night there was no need to follow anyone. We drove aimlessly, letting the silence swell between us, until we ended up in the parking lot of a lonely roadside diner. We ordered fries we didn't touch. I kept my eyes locked on the salt shaker, thoughts coiling in tight circles. She's been lying about who she is, I said at last. Zoe gave a slow, deliberate nod. So has he. Said he worked in tech sales. Truth is, he quit a year ago, sits at home now. Crypto stuff. Another disguise, another crack in the mirror. I met her gaze. So, what do we do now? Her breath left her in a slow release, like she was setting down something heavy. Now we get ready. It was the first time her voice had an edge to it, a hardness. And that's when I understood. We weren't just collecting evidence anymore. We were building something. Not for open retaliation, not yet, but something dangerously close. Within days, the air in our apartment shifted. Hannah, despite her mastery of hiding things, began performing. One Tuesday, she made dinner out of nowhere, chicken marsala, the exact dish from our 3rd anniversary. She set candles on the table, let soft jazz hum from her phone, and even wore that navy blouse I'd once told her could get her on the cover of a magazine. Thought we could have a meal together for once? She said, flashing a smile that felt just a bit too quick. Like before. I sat opposite her, returned the smile politely, and chewed without tasting. The wine in our glasses trembled at the brim. She raised hers, eyes shimmering like they had in the beginning. To starting over, she said softly. Our glasses met. I managed a faint grin, but my thoughts were far away. The night before, Zoe and I had met in the dim corner of a bookstore parking lot, trading information like contraband. She'd uncovered a second email account tied to Owen, used mostly for sending e-tickets and hotel confirmations. One stood out, a cabin, booked 2 months earlier, multiple nights, 2 guests. Guest 2, Hannah. And now Hannah sat here, reminiscing about a long-ago beach trip to Myrtle. She pulled out a photo album, glossy prints bound together. In one, I was half asleep in a hammock, her draped over me like a living blanket. You still snored, she teased, nudging me with a laugh. Thought you'd float away. I gave a polite chuckle, the kind you'd offer a stranger making small talk. Think we should try counseling again? I asked. Her smile faltered, just a flicker, before she regained control. You'd want that? Of course, I said evenly, if it might help. She reached across the table and touched my hand. I'd like that. We booked a session and the act began. In the waiting room, she leaned into me, her head resting on my shoulder. The gesture had all the right moves, but none of the weight. It felt like someone else wearing her shape. Our therapist, Rena, had the practiced calm of someone used to untangling other people's knots. She asked open-ended questions. Hannah answered with polished, deliberate phrasing. I've just been under so much pressure, she said warmly. Work's been overwhelming. I wondered which fictional office she was talking about. Rena turned to me. And you, Matthew? How have you been feeling? I looked at this flawless version of my wife and told the only truth I could. Detached. Hannah's grip on my hand was too firm. We'll get through this. We always do. I nodded. But I knew otherwise. Zoe already had a month's worth of hotel receipts printed. And while Hannah poured wine and dusted off old memories, I was making sure my phone stayed charged for the next stakeout. Our home had become a theater. We hit our cues, delivered our lines, smiled for the unseen crowd. But the script? That belonged to me now. Therapy settled into routine. Wednesdays at 5:30, same seats, same stretched smiles. Rena kept trying to dig deeper. This week, let's focus on honesty, she said during our 3rd session. Real honesty, no roles. I nearly laughed. Hannah crossed her legs, folding her hands neatly in her lap. Honestly, I've just been so stressed, she said. Work, family, I don't think I've had the mental space to process it all. I stared at her. You haven't had space? My tone stayed soft. Her eyes shifted. I don't mean you haven't tried. Sometimes I need to sort things out on my own. Rena nodded. That's reasonable. And Matthew, how do you respond when you hear that? What I wanted to say, I respond by downloading call logs from the imaginary job you don't have. What I actually said, I suppose I'm learning to listen more. Half true. I was listening, just not to her. Because my real conversations were somewhere else. Zoe and I had our own rhythm now. After each session with Hannah, I'd send her one word. Done. She'd reply, coffee. That was our ritual. A corner table in some quiet cafe. We didn't scan the room, we just talked. At first it was strictly updates, timelines, sightings, facts. But soon it drifted. She asked about my sleep. I told her about waking at 3:14 a.m., staring into the dark, hearing only the weight of silence. She told me about the stack of unread books by her bed, about dreams heavy enough to sink her. We never touched, never crossed a line, but the space between us felt steady, real. Meanwhile, Hannah kept up the facade. She suggested a weekend away. Just us, she said brightly. Like before. I agreed, knowing I'd cancel. I did. She only smiled softly. Next time. In therapy, she cast herself as the misunderstood one. I've been trying to be here, she told Rena, but it feels like Matthew's already left. On that, she wasn't wrong. I had already gone, emotionally, mentally, maybe even spiritually. I just hadn't moved my body out of the space yet. At home, life clicked along mechanically. Mornings brought shallow exchanges. Need anything from the store? She'd ask. I'm fine, I'd say. At night, we turned off the lights together, but in bed, our backs faced opposite directions. The air between us felt unnaturally still. Too still. Yet every so often, I'd catch her watching me. Not with suspicion, but with something that looked almost like hope. As though she still believed we were following some unspoken script that would land us at a happy ending. But we weren't. Because every night, my mind drifted back to the woman across from me. The one with nothing to gain and only truth to give. Zoe never asked for more than I could give, yet something inside me kept wanting to hand her everything. It wasn't love. Not exactly. It was the realization of what it meant to be truly seen. It came slowly. She started making the bed again, this time with sharp, neat hospital corners she'd once ignored. My shirts came back pressed, my laundry folded without comment. On Thursday, she slipped a packed lunch into my hands before work, and inside was a folded piece of paper. Thought you might like a surprise. Love, H. She'd done that when we were newly married. But now, it felt staged, like someone reciting lines from memory. At dinner, she didn't just ask about my day, she wanted specifics. So, is Graham still hassling you about the Jenkins project? She asked, sliding roasted vegetables onto my plate. I blinked. You remember that? Her head tilted and she smiled. Of course I pay attention. She said it like proof, like holding on to a single remembered fact could patch the cracks between us. I nodded, still micromanaging, nothing new. Her shoulders eased as though passing some small conversational test meant we were making progress. But I knew better. The night before, I'd caught her with my phone. I was careful, never left it unlocked, never out of reach, but I'd stepped away for less than half a minute. When I came back, she was perched on the couch's edge, my phone face down on the coffee table. You left your phone, she said evenly. Yeah, I picked it up. Did it ring? No, she looked away. We didn't talk about it again. Instead, the gestures multiplied. French toast on Saturday. A candle flickering in the bathroom while I showered. My preferred toothpaste appearing in the cabinet without asking. Relentless, almost tactical. Beneath the warmth, I saw the math. She wasn't reaching out because she missed me. She was studying the lines, trying to spot where they'd changed, wondering why her audience, me, had stopped clapping. That Sunday, as I worked at the dining table, I felt her eyes on me. When I looked up, she blinked and smiled. "You seem lighter lately," she said. "Do I?" She nodded, like something's been lifted. I met her gaze. "Maybe it has." Her mouth parted, like she was about to ask something else, but instead she turned away, vanishing into the kitchen. And I was left wondering exactly what she thought she was repairing, and why now. Maybe she'd picked up on the fact that I no longer reacted when she claimed late-night work dinners, that I didn't ask who she was texting, that I'd stopped digging for truth in her words. It wasn't the lack of affection that unnerved her. It was the silence. She couldn't decipher it. And for someone who thrived on control, that uncertainty was far more dangerous than confrontation. I didn't need to shout. I didn't need to accuse. My quiet did all the work. It had been 4 days since I'd last seen Zoe. We'd agreed to keep our distance for a while, let the air settle, keep suspicion at bay. But that morning, her message felt different. "Can we meet? Tonight? No code, no secretive phrasing, just a question." We met at the park on 8th and Linden, the one with the broken fountain and benches that always leaned too far back. The place was nearly empty, except for a couple of joggers and an old man scattering breadcrumbs to pigeons. Zoe was already there, staring ahead, hands buried in her jacket pockets. A knot pulled tight in my chest. She wasn't usually this quiet. "You okay?" I asked, sitting beside her. She exhaled slowly. "I took a test." "A test?" She nodded. "Pregnancy." The world seemed to hold its breath. She pulled a folded slip of paper from her coat pocket and handed it over. Positive. The rope around my chest drew tighter. We'd never intended to reach this point. It hadn't been some frantic, reckless fling, just one night after a long week in the stillness of my car under a sky blurred with city light. Not rushed, not desperate, gentle, almost reverent. A release we hadn't seen coming, and now the evidence was in my hands. "You're sure it's mine?" I asked quietly, hating myself for the question. Her gaze met mine. Not offended, just tired. "I haven't been with Owen in weeks. I've been staying with my sister half the time. He barely notices." I swallowed, trying to contain the rising panic. "I didn't tell you to drag you into this," she said. "I haven't decided what I'm doing. I just thought you should know." I stared past her at the fountain's sputtering spray. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to," she murmured. "This doesn't change your plan. Your life stays the same. You don't owe me anything." That hurt. Not from guilt, but because part of me wanted to owe her something. "I'm not walking away," I said finally. "Matthew, you don't—" "I'm not walking away," I repeated. Her eyes locked on mine, and for a long moment we sat there, tied together by something neither of us had prepared for. The trees whispered above us. A crow called in the distance. The park seemed suddenly enormous. "Does she know?" Zoe asked. "Hannah? Number, she's too busy staring at my shoes and pretending she remembers our first dance." We both laughed, but the sound was empty. "I can't lie about this," I said. "You won't have to," she replied. That night, I walked home with my hands deep in my pockets, my mind pulling in every direction at once. For months, my goal had been clear: uncover the truth, end the marriage, take control. But now, the truth had shifted into something fragile, something unexpected, something neither Hannah nor Owen could possibly see coming. The question repeating in my head wasn't, "What happens now?" but "Who am I after this?" Some choices redraw the map of who you are, and there's no returning to where you started. The next time we met in therapy, the air felt unusually still. Hannah didn't bring excuses. No half smiles about being busy, no stories about exhaustion. She sat with her fingers laced neatly in her lap, the silence draped over her like a heavy, unmoving blanket. Across from us, Rena leaned back in her chair, her eyes moving between Hannah and me. She seemed to notice the shift, too. We all stayed quiet until Hannah's voice finally broke through. "I can't reach him anymore," she said, her words flat but fragile. "It's like he's drifted so far that even if I screamed, he wouldn't hear me." I didn't look at her right away. My gaze stayed on her hand as she twisted her wedding ring halfway off and slid it back into place. a nervous gesture I hadn't seen since our second year together. "I know I've done damage," she continued. "Serious damage. But I kept believing we could get back to where we were, that you'd still want to fight for us, that if I could remind you of what we used to be, you'd see me again." Her eyes searched mine, waiting for an opening. I finally met her stare. My tone was even. "You're asking me to fight," I said. "But fight for what exactly, Hannah? For a version of our life you were rewriting while lying to my face? For a marriage you were editing on one side while living something else entirely on the other?" Her shoulders dipped, but she didn't turn away. Rena's voice was gentle. "Hannah, what would it mean to you if Matthew forgave you? If he stayed?" Hannah's eyes brightened with tears. "It would mean home. It would mean we made it through." "And if he doesn't?" Rena asked softly. Hannah hesitated, then whispered, "Then I'll know I waited too long." The silence that followed was different, the kind that strips every practiced defense bare. Gone were the carefully timed smiles, the breezy justifications, the curated regret. What remained was unvarnished. But I already knew about the weekends at the cabin. I'd already seen the blurry photo of her hands resting on someone else's chest. I'd already heard Zoe's sharp breath when she handed me the test. I studied Hannah, wondering how many different masks she had worn for different people. Was she the woman in that photograph? Or the one sitting across from me now, eyes damp and shoulders slumped? "I still love you," she said quietly. The words didn't land. Love doesn't vanish for months and pretend all that's been lost is time. Rena looked at me with that calm, unreadable therapist expression. "Do you want to respond?" I inhaled slowly. "Not right now." Hannah lowered her gaze. She didn't tense up, didn't shift in her seat, just stayed still. When we left, she didn't try to take my hand. The drive back was soundless, not tense, not angry, final. The kind of quiet where one person has already gone and the other is only just realizing it. Weeks later, I made sure to be 20 minutes late. Hannah's voice floated through the open windows of her co-worker's house, measured, deliberate, the public tone she used when she wanted to be seen in the best possible light. The driveway was crowded. The scent of grilled skewers mingled with expensive perfume in the mild spring air. Laughter rose in well-timed bursts under strings of soft white lights, every detail arranged for the kind of night people post online. When Zoe and I walked inside, her muted green dress drew attention without trying. She carried herself like she belonged anywhere. Heads turned, conversations softened. Hannah froze mid-laugh in her seat next to Owen. For one suspended second, the room seemed unsure whether to keep moving. A glass clinked. Someone mumbled a greeting. But the atmosphere had already shifted. She rose to her feet, her gaze moving from Zoe to me. "Matthew," she said, her voice catching. I offered her the kind of polite smile you give a stranger who's brushed past you. "Sorry for the delay. Traffic." Zoe stayed beside me, steady as ever. I reached into my blazer, pulled out a manila envelope, and set it on the coffee table. "Tonight seemed right for introductions," I said. "There's been enough confusion. Too many things left in the dark. Honesty tends to clear the air." Owen's face drained. Somewhere in the room, someone muttered, "Oh my God." Hannah's hands shook as she looked from me to the envelope, then to Zoe. "They're divorce papers," I told her. "Signed, just waiting on you." Her voice wavered. "You don't have to do this here." "That's where you're wrong," I said, my voice carrying now. "Here is exactly where it needs to happen." The room held itself still. People looked over the rims of their glasses, unsure whether they were watching a scandal unfold or history being made. Owen reached for her arm. She recoiled instantly. "Don't touch me!" she snapped. And with that, the image cracked. The murmurs sharpened, years of deceit condensed into low, cutting whispers. Someone attempted a laugh, but it faltered before it could take shape. I turned for the door. Zoe followed. Behind us, Hannah's voice rose, raw and desperate. "Was any of it real?" I didn't look back. "That depends which version of you you're asking," I said, stepping into the cool night. The stars above were indifferent, but I wasn't. For the first time in months, the truth was mine. 3 months later, the noise had faded. Life moved at a gentler rhythm. The sky outside the hospital was pale, forgiving, as I stepped into room 204. No storm clouds, no rain, just a mild breeze drifting through the tall windows. Zoe sat upright in bed, her dark hair pulled into a loose knot, a newborn wrapped in pale blue resting at her chest. When she looked at me, her expression held no surprise, only recognition, only home. I crossed the room quietly, careful not to disturb the fragile peace we had found. In that brief span of time, everything seemed brushed by an unseen grace, as though an invisible hand had drawn a line beneath the past. A long and weary chapter had reached its last page, and in its place, a new one began. Pared down, uncluttered, holding only what was true. "He's beautiful," I breathed. Zoe's mouth curved gently, and she ran her fingers through the baby's soft hair as though it were something fragile. "He has no clue," she said, "what storms came before him." "Maybe that's a mercy," I replied, and she answered with a faint nod. After that, words felt unnecessary. Silence settled around us, not the cold, empty kind, but a quiet that felt like home, a stillness I hadn't realized my heart had been craving. There were no titles to give it, no talk of what tomorrow might hold, just two people who had stood in the same fire and come out with nothing left to hide. I gathered the baby closer to my chest. His eyelids, thin and pale as translucent paper, trembled once in a while. His tiny mouth shifted into dream shapes that spoke no language. He didn't cry. He simply existed, warm, breathing, present. When I finally rose to leave, Zoe said softly, "You can drop by whenever you want." I looked at her, and for the first time there was nothing to decode, no hidden corners, no sharp edges. Only Zoe. "I will," I said. That evening, in my smaller apartment on the far side of the city, I filled a glass with water and leaned against the window frame. Beyond the glass, the light scattered across the skyline blinked and broke apart like half-formed thoughts. My phone buzzed once. A single message. From Hannah. Was it real? No opening, no explanation. Just those 3 words. I stared at the lit screen, my thumb hovering. I could have replied in anger, in riddles, even with tenderness. But every option rang hollow. Sometimes the most honest answer is silence. I powered the phone down. Outside, the wind shifted. Somewhere out of sight, a tree loosed its petals, and I could feel them brushing the side of the building as they passed. It struck me then, how we almost never notice the exact second something is over. We only feel the weight lift when we stop pretending it's still there. And so, this is where the telling ends. Thank you for walking through it with me. If it left a mark on you, there are more stories waiting. Until our paths cross again, my friend,